Last time, we built a massive logistics space hub. This time, we build a massive logistics space hub. With a space elevator and space trains. A ridiculous warehouse sushi bus to transport goods. This is the good kind of sushi, not that masochistic stuff. And sushi belts to feed our space science factories. Yes, there is a good kind of sushi. This build has been so much easier with it. But first, some other stuff happened. So, I ran out of fuel while flying my spaceship. I was kind of stuck in space. I have no idea what to do, so maybe get my fuel tanker and send it to meet me somewhere? Does that work? Alright, come to my rescue. So, I was hoping I could land next to my ship. It just lets me board my piece of ship. But I'm not on that, so I can board the tanker, I guess. Oh man, this is not going to be easy, is it? So I landed on Mercurial and made a whole lot of barrels of fuel. Maybe that'll work. Yeah, this'll work. I can just do some damage to my ship and repair it afterwards. I guess I gotta watch that fuel gauge a little more carefully. After 240 hours, the first CME to strike one of my colonies arrives. The old 400 megawatt reactor like this one on Katsuki wasn't going to cut it, so I built this beast. It still just uses 4 reactors, but can provide 1.1 gigawatts of power for 3 minutes using saved up steam. It manages easily. And the next CME is going to hit the orbit of some sun I've never heard of? Okay. So I built a space elevator, but now have to feed it 1,000 plus cables to make it work. Carefully saving the game first. Let's find out what this does. Alright, seems to power up. Jesus, drawing 600 megawatts until it's full. Okay, that's a bit intense. And then it starts eating cables, but keeps working for now. I suppose once the cables get low enough, it'll just shut down. Alright, I'll reload the save file. I'm going to wait to finish this until I'm ready on the space side. Funny thing I noticed, these new 64 reach pylons have such a long connect range that the base game gets confused displaying where power is available. It works, just the UI is a little confused. And sometime later, the space side is set up. Let's finish this thing. And I've got a train ready to start carrying supplies to orbit. Oh, and check this out. Now that I've connected space, all of those solar panels in space that run at, I don't know, 4x production, power novice. I'm probably done using those steam turbines except for CME defense. Very nice. Okay, time to program the train. The only station I can see is the elevator. I mean, I have to go through the elevator, but how do I tell it to go to the stop in orbit? Okay, maybe I add the elevator first, and then I can do it. No, that didn't change anything. Well, alright, no choice. Tell it to go. And the engine is stuck in the elevator in space. And the cargo wagon on novice? That's weird. Alright, how about this force button? Does that work? No, it doesn't do anything. Well, actually, it moved the cargo wagon up. I don't know how that helps. Okay, wait a second. I can click on the engine while it is stuck in the elevator. And now I can tell it to go to a stop in orbit. Interesting. Alright, so the rules aren't completely intuitive, but once you figure them out, it's pretty easy to work with. So I was minding my business in space when the alarm started sounding. Mercurial was under attack. I half expected this. Mercurial has biter meteors, and with only 8 meteor defense cannons, one will slip through eventually. So I hopped into my ship to deal with it. And they're going straight after the meteor cannons and ignoring the artillery and pile of lasers nearby. Unfortunately, that's a pretty smart move. Looks like a couple biter meteors fell to the south. God, what a mess. Setting max speed, no time to lose. Come on, come on. Ah, my meteor defense. spider meteors. Bah! Anyway, sometime later I've got 10 meteor defense installations. 8 was clearly not enough. And I threw in some laser turret hardpoints. Will that be enough? We'll see. In other news, I unlocked wide area beacons. You place these things down and for some reason factories collect all around them. And a very nice blue chip recipe that depends upon holmium cables. I also started using new recipes for heat shields when I have extra iridium, and new ones for low density structures when I have extra beryl. I only want to produce these when I've got excess, and so I've got a signal coming through this pylon from the train stop that basically says if I've got extra beryl and extra iridium, go ahead and trigger the new recipes. A good friend of mine asked about this warehouse mall and how it worked, so I told him I'd make a video. As I slept in it, I realized I could make the mall a lot better, and so that's all in the video, which will be linked in the description. Anytime you have any questions about anything you see, feel free to ask. This partially built mall is an example of the advanced warehouse mall style. One of the beauties of this model is that when I wanted to put bots here to put in the RoboPort, I didn't have to use the spaces in between to do anything with them. I just had to program this combinator with the ingredients and they would automatically come to where the factories are. The simplicity and ease of this whole thing basically became the inspiration for the main bus on the new space base. This is an overhead view of the new base and really a focus on the 64x64 power poles. These little spaceships here, this train station, they all look so tiny when the poles reach so far. A quick note, this train over here is a train that goes to my old base. It's not really part of the build. It was a way of getting all the goods from the old base I wanted to hold on to and bringing them down to the new base. So just ignore that train. So the first difference you'll notice with the new base is that it's got space trains. This makes fluid transportation so much easier. I just fly it up straight from an office. Kind of weird, but you fly in a train. Otherwise, this logistics section here is just like the last video, so I'm not going to cover it. Only big difference is that all goods go through this warehouse. Goods coming from the train, goods coming from other colonies, and from here they're distributed outwards to the other colonies through this holding chest or down to the main base. Shipping stuff from Novice up to orbit isn't much different. It's obviously by train this time instead of spaceship. Otherwise, I use the same signaling. Only quirky thing here is that I couldn't use the cargo full category for the train because trains don't do that well with Sushi trains. So instead I had to add a circuit to notice that things have finally started backing up to let the train go on. After the main logistics part of the base, everything routes down into this mall. Ignore those malls, that's from the old space base. As this was inspired by a warehouse mall, it's used as a warehouse mall among other things. Big difference between this and a regular mall is that a lot of these goods are not produced for me. They are produced to be used elsewhere in the construction of science. There's a big robo-mall for large buildings that aren't fun to do by hand. Otherwise, I've reorganized some stuff. The lab's here by itself with the belt bringing it from where they're produced. The few buildings here produce thermofluid because that's a backbone for everything. And of course, thermofluid needs to be cooled to multiple different temperatures, and that's all in one spot here so I can expand it out as needed. All the recycling happens here, from old chips to like scrap and all that. All cards are produced here, including the significant data cards. And of course, the machine learning for the first two utility and production science packs in this thing are built here. And that's basically all the tier 1 beginner science. After that, all the mid-game sciences are being built out here. They're about the same as last time, not super interesting. The other big change I made while building this mall is heavy use of sushi belts. For a lot of the space exploration, space science, the number of goods you need, so the count, total count, is not super high. These are the counts per minute, which a white belt can deliver like 3,000 items per minute. This is way below 3,000, but the number of items is quite diverse, and you got to ship them to a whole bunch of factories up the line. Turns out that makes a sushi belt a perfect target for this. This entire sushi belt is fed by a single purple inserter, which can deliver enough goods for about 100 science per minute. Actually, more than that, but that's a ballpark. At each level in the sushi belt, there's a chest to store the items and a combinator saying what items we want here. That mixes with the negative contents of the chest, just the way we do in the basic warehouse mall, to program a filter inserter. And that filter inserter, like the advanced version of the mall, gets programmed through a filter to pass a signal downstream, which means while this guy down here wants significant data, and this guy does not need significant data, the demand for significant data still gets sent down to this inserter, and this inserter, and this inserter, until all of the demand is sent all the way to the beginning of this belt. If we program this thing to deliver those demand, he will start unloading goods from this chest. He sends the request to the chest, and all these inserters will just bring him whatever he needs. And all those goods will flow in and get dropped into the chest as well as the factories. The biggest advantage of this is that you're down to a single belt for all these ingredients. But it also gets rid of the feedback problem. The feedback problem, and there's a lot of these in space exploration, is an ingredient will require something like iridium plate, and it will also produce iridium plate. So how do you get the output back into the input? It's kind of like the Kovarex problem. Typical solution is to build a priority splitter to take the goods you produced, feed them back into your input line, and suck them back in. And this is to avoid bottlenecks, backups, because if you're not careful here, your whole factory will shut down because it can't get rid of the stuff it produced. With the sushi belts, this problem is trivial. You take the output that you didn't want and you shove it back into the belt, which goes right back into the chest to feed back into the factory. You don't even really have to think about it. This change has simplified my material science significantly. Here's the new base. And this is what the old base looked like. Piles and piles of belts. They're kind of hard to follow. And then I've got these weird janky things that are actually putting items on grounds into chests to feed them back to avoid the feedback loop problem. It worked, but it was ugly. While I was building out the biological science pack and putting my forward sushi belts in place, which I used 2 purple inserters for because it demands a little more than 1, I realized I could do the same thing with reverse sushi belt. This belt here is a reverse sushi belt. All of these things produce materials which are needed elsewhere down the line and often multiple places. So rather than trying to route the belt directly to the place that needed it because there were multiple, I just reverse sushi belted it. Sent it down to the factory here, which, based upon demand, tells which inserters which kind of goods to shove in the belt. They get shoved in the factory to get pulled out later, often immediately. Like, for instance, this genetic data is used by this factory, but instead of passing it directly, he shoves in the sushi belt back there to come back here into this chest, where it is then loaded in as needed. I also mostly consolidated my reverse logistics into a single belt here. This single belt brings back, well, everything produced by the factories that's needed earlier in the system. Excess data cards get pulled off here. Insights for the different sciences to make significant data get pulled off here. Recyclable materials here. And everything else must be a science pack and goes in here. This has simplified the reverse logistics quite a bit. I also moved module production past level 3 into spaced. Past level 3, the modules all require some ingredient that only produced in space. Why bring it back down to novice if I can just build them here, especially because you can't use production modules when building, well, production modules. To make this work, I had to pull some of the obscure resources like biological catalog into the mall. Since biological catalogs are produced way down here, in order to get them up to the mall where the module factory requires them, I simply put them on the reverse sushi belt that I already had in place. So when the sushi belt wants biological catalogs, they'll get shoved to the sushi belt and split off here. The demand signal for these biological catalogs is derived from the mall demand signal. If the mall demands them, well, then that belt demands them and they'll make it into the mall. That's it for this video. My objective now is to finish up all the mid-tier space sciences. I've gotten most of them done. At which point I will have to then start looking at deep space science, which requires resources outside of the solar system. See you next time.